So basically, we're going to start with what we call the imperative for change, why it is very important to do something here. Then we'll look at the process itself. We'll look at a couple of case studies. And we'll look at Centaurus, the building as we've seen it, and some ideas for what we might be able to do. And then we'd love to hear from you. But we'll be hearing from you throughout this process. So please feel free to stop me, interrupt me. But we have at least a couple of places where we're going to stop and get your input. So let me start with this imperative for change. Interestingly enough, when we talk about imperative for change, I'm going to start with primordial learning metaphors, which are basically ways in which human beings have learned for millennia. And essentially, there are four primordial ways in which human beings have learned. One is called the campfire, which is a form of learning where one person talks, tells a story over a campfire or over the glow of the LCD projector, and everybody else listens to the story. If you have a good storyteller, then people are going to be paying more attention. If not, not so much. But that's just one form of learning, which is predominantly practiced in schools where the teacher sort of is in charge and is telling students what to do. That's a predominant form of learning that happens in schools. Then there's something called the watering hole form of learning, which is when kids and students learn from each other, and when teachers learn from each other too. So we need to make sure that that form of learning is also happening. And there's a third form of learning called the cave, which is where people internalize and synthesize information that they gathered at the campfire and the watering hole and are in their own head, making sense of what they heard. And finally, there's life, which is where you get to try things out. Because if you haven't actually done something, you have learned it in a theoretical format, but you have not tested it in a real-world setting. So you need to do that too. So if you walk around Centaurus, I think you'll find a good balance between all these forms of learning. However, you don't find as much physical facility designed to accommodate that. But I mean, as an example, when we walked through the engineering department, which is one that really stands out, you did see, even during the short tour that we're there, we saw these forms of learning happening. But I think to a great extent, your existing facility really stands in the way of this sort of really rich kind of interplay of learning modalities. So current building that you have, it represents a model that was invented and perfected between 1875 and 1925. So that's basically when this model was invented. So you can imagine how far out of date it is. It's not just 30 or 40 years old. It's well over 100 years out of sync with where we are today. So if you look at the factory model of schooling, it was invented, as I said, perfected between 1875 and 1925. In fact, the grade system that we have, the A, B, C, D, was actually borrowed from the meatpacking industry. So that's the only other group that actually grades kids by grade, as opposed to a more sophisticated way of measuring student accomplishments. So I'm just showing you a bunch of pictures. This I think may be from Brunei. This one is from a very exclusive private school in Florida. This one is from Azerbaijan. This one is from Puerto Rico. This one is, I think, from Canada. This one is from India. This one is from your own school. So basically, the physical model of school, if you were to blindfold someone and put them in a school building anywhere in the United States or anywhere in Canada or anywhere in Europe, you wouldn't even know which country you are in, leave alone know which town you are in. So there's very little of that community's sort of special qualities or ethos, as we call it, that's reflected in the school building because it follows a generic model of our mental model of what a school is supposed to look like. And what we did is we tried to connect that with the research on how we learn, and we found huge disconnects between the way school buildings are physically designed, particularly for today's world, and the way we learn. I mean, the science, neurology about how people learn is completely disconnected from the way school buildings are designed. Even Time magazine, on its cover, How to Build a Student for the 21st Century, used this as the cover shot. I mean, it is so entrenched in our psyche about what a school is supposed to look like that it's very hard to break that mental model of what school is. Most school districts, by the way, have a thick book that tells you exactly how to design a school. So in other words, a school is already designed before you even begin the process. And so that's why you can never get something new because you're just repeating the old. And here, very refreshingly, literally from day one, from talking to Dawn and Tim and Leslie and Tiffany and Bruce, they were very open to the idea of let's start with a clean slate. Let's do the school, design schools based upon what our needs are, rather than be fixated on some mental model of what it is supposed to be, which is why we are having these conversations. So this date is very, very important, 1993, January 23, because that was the date Mosaic web browser was introduced to the public. And the reason I'm saying this is important, you'll see, because this made today's internet possible, right? But the thing is that the proliferation of websites, and as at least even at the turn of the century, was barely a blip on the sort of on the horizon, and now it's well over 1 billion sites, and it has radically changed the way we live, work, and play, and learn. So this chart actually is borrowed from Professor Richard Elmore, who says that learning is skyrocketing now. I mean, learning has become ubiquitous. Everybody and anybody can learn. Professor Elmore and I did a course last summer that was offered by Harvard, and 80,000 people from all around the world signed up for that one course. And you could, if you completed the course, you could actually get a certificate from Harvard for this. What's called Leaders of Learning, and you can actually find that course online still. The course itself is closed, but the materials are still online. And he said that in over 30-some years of teaching at Harvard, he wasn't able to reach as many students as he did with that one online course. So it's a pretty radical departure from where we were. I mean, learning has now become more democratic in the sense that people in countries that previously could not afford to take a course with a Harvard professor are now able to do so. So it's a very, very different model. Whereas the school learning is kind of flatlining, because we've perfected this model. They say that never before in the history of the United States have we better prepared students for the industrial age than we do today, right? So we've perfected the model, so there's only so much we can improve something that we've actually perfected over the last 50 years. So what we are saying is that relevance gap, the reason why kids want to come to school, we need to close that gap. We need to make schools places that kids are coming to because they're getting something in school that they can't get out of school. So that's kind of what we're trying for. I mean, our practice has been always about trying to change that curve so that it kind of begins to, if not mirror the learning curve, at least get close to it. So really, if you think about the building that you have here, it was designed for this model which says the same thing, students learning the same thing from the same teacher, the same time, in the same place, grouped by the same age, right? That's the model for which this building was built. But today's paradigm demands each student learns different things from different people at different times in different ways with others of different ages. I mean, that's a pretty radical transformation of the model. So if you look at then and now, you can see how significant and substantial that transformation is, and how a building that was designed for Model A will simply not work for Model B. It's the hardware in which the software that's on the right has to run, and the software on the right simply doesn't run on, it's kind of like trying to run today's software on an Apple IIe from 1980. It just doesn't work. So basically, I just wanted to say that everything that we do is based upon research and based upon actual practice and perfected over many, many years. Actually, I've been in school construction business since 1983, and my own practice as a professional architect since since 1999. So this is something that's taken us a while to get the hang of what is a so-called new paradigm school. And it's not something we invented, it's something the educators invented, and we help them get to where they wanted to be. Does anybody want to quickly talk about the overview, or? Okay, we'll just keep going on this one. It's you'll get more of this when we through the websites. Essentially, what we are saying is that this process actually began with the school district developing a set of innovation guidelines, all of which you can find on your tables. There's a group of 6 or 7 guidelines that are the culmination of work that we've done with pretty much all the educators across the entire school district. So whatever we do here at Centaurus, I think that we've made a commitment to live up to those 8 or 9 principles, which we talked to the Centaurus community, and at least Rhonda is here, she can contradict me if I'm wrong. They felt that these actually reflected your own philosophy of education as well. So there's nothing here that would stand in the way of us doing a really great job for Centaurus. But just look at the last one. Learning is personalized and learner-led. Very, very, very difficult to do when you have one teacher and 35 kids in a classroom with 45 minutes or 1 hour to do deliver a lesson. It's exceptionally difficult to do that. So learning environments to support innovation. What do those look like? The new model is what we call a learning community model, where we don't just have classrooms, we have spaces where students can engage in a variety of learning activities that go far beyond just a lecture. So they can listen to a lecture, but then they can actually do something about it. Remember those 4 primordial learning metaphors. So they can interact with their peers, they can construct things with their hands, they can go off to a corner and reflect on what they're learning, they can write, they can research, they can do all of these things that makes that lecture much more meaningful. Just to give you a sense of lectures, by the way, in and of themselves, even an engrossing lecture in and of itself is not a very good way of learning. They actually done some research that found that motivational speakers who are being called to corporations actually make 0 impact on the company's bottom line, 0. So they inspire everybody. Everybody is really excited to listen to the motivational speaker, but then they go back on Monday morning and just keep doing what they were doing, right? Because it doesn't change your life just because you heard somebody say some great things. So what we're saying is that unless these other 3 modalities kick in, the cave mode, the watering hole mode, and the life mode, the campfire in and of itself doesn't do much, which is why my lecture here would be meaningless if we didn't do something more, which is kind of one of the reasons why we did these online things where you can participate. In fact, you can be participating right now as I'm speaking to you. So I'll show you this school. So this was the temporary building they gave us to see if we can do something that would actually work for their community. And when we were done over the summer, that was that same space that we changed it into. Now, they still had classrooms that were off of this space, but you notice we got rid of the hallway, for one thing, captured much of that space, and created an environment where many of those forms of learning can happen that could not happen previously in the classroom. So given the confidence with this space, that they had used it for well over a year, they felt very comfortable with this. The teachers felt comfortable with it. The students felt comfortable with it. So we ended up designing their high school, which was built and opened, I think, last year or the year before. And you can see, essentially, the high school is based on these 3 principles of the we, the me, and then the active learner. So the entrance to the high school looks like this. It's a place that is where the whole school can gather. And when it's not being used like that, students are using it in that watering hole mode, where they can plug in their laptops, or they can sit there, they can talk, or even work independently if need to be. So it serves more than one purpose. So the key is that every space in the school had to meet one important criteria. How does it serve the school's bottom line, which is teaching and learning? That's what it's there for. So the architecture is subservient to the primary reason for the school being there in the first place, which is to serve students and teachers and the community. So again, you can see connections to nature, which, by the way, we'll get to for Centaurus. We are very disappointed by how little the school building tries to connect to the outdoors. So that was something very big at this school. And you can see all those forms of learning happening: individual learning, team learning, active learning. And you can see the lectures are still happening, because there's always this fear that we're going back to the 1970s open classrooms. And I want to still that fear right now. This is not a return to the open classrooms. Basically, what we're talking about is designing purposefully, keeping teaching and learning in mind, as opposed to blindly accepting a model that has been defunct now for, as I said, over 100 years. And in this case, you can notice that classrooms have these garage doors, which the teacher can choose to open or close, depending upon whether the activity is something that needs to be private, or is something that needs, that if it's more of a collaborative stuff, that the teacher doesn't need to be in a direct instruction mode, he or she can open the garage door. And you can see there are no hallways. Every square inch of this building is used for teaching and learning. This building is about 15% more efficient than the traditional school building. That means that for every 100 square feet of build space in this building, we gave back to the school 15 square feet that they would otherwise have lost to corridors and janitor's closets and stairwells and toilets and things. So this one I wanted to present because this is the Academy of the Holy Names in Tampa. The reason I'm bringing this up is, again, a very successful demographic of kids who've been going to the best colleges, the best universities around the country, a 100-year tradition of excellence. the first girls' school in all of the Tampa region, and located on probably the most expensive real estate in the city. And again, because they're successful, it's hard for them to think about something different. And so when they brought us in, the president of the school was very much interested in change, but he had a hard time talking to his teachers and his board, who were led by the sisters, to allow him to make those changes. So what they said is, let's start with pilots first and see if this idea works. So we were actually given originally 2 computer labs to make these so-called new paradigm. And as we said earlier, this isn't an education, this isn't just an architectural solution. So we had to bring in educators to try a new model of learning, which is much more student-directed. And Chris actually led the intervention on behalf of F&I to work with the teachers to help them through this process of what do you have to do differently in a space like this to take full advantage of its potential to make it more student-centered. So we'll show you the actual images from this. And we also welcome you, if anybody's in the Tampa area, to go visit the school. So here's the 2 rooms that we had, Computer Lab A and Computer Lab B, which clearly are teacher-directed spaces. That's clearly designed for a teacher to manage a group of students doing the exact same thing at the same time, right? So what we ended up with was a design where first of all, we took the wall down between the two rooms. We created a variety of teaching and learning spaces, and that's what the space looked like after it was done. It was done over a summer. So talking earlier about the budget, and this one was done for about $250,000, right, Jay? Yep. $250,000. So, and that, as you can see, a pretty high-end construction. It wasn't. We got the best furniture the money could buy. There was a lot of custom millwork there. We got new lighting. We got pretty much everything for that money. So you can see the design of the space and how. And as you go there, you'll see more and more of it being directed by the kids. And the teachers realized, they said that the minute we walk into the space, the space almost tells us that we need to change the way we behave. And essentially, the teachers felt that stepping away from having to control and constantly tell kids what to do ended up with much better results from the kids. Students were actually producing things that the teachers never thought they could do once they were given the opportunity to do it. And the more kids are able to do, the less teachers are now enforcing their own rules on them. So you can see, like here, you can just go on. And by the way, when we are in these rooms, we are about 5 or 6 adults just traipsing through a space that's not much bigger than this. In fact, around less space than this, less space. And kids are totally not distracted. They're not saying, who are these adults coming here? They're just doing their own thing. Because once you're engaged and excited by what you're doing, there's nothing. And this was the first day, by the way, the 5th graders were in this space. They had never been in this space before. And they took to it like fish to water. And you can see this teacher's here in this cave space. They're in this campfire space. There's some kids here in the cave space back there. And here you can see kids. This feels like a Starbucks. And the teacher just kind of walks around and can give quick direction if she needs to. Otherwise, the kids are basically doing stuff. And you can see these kids are working on their own. And this is a good picture. This teacher just pulled a whiteboard to give a quick lesson. And then the whiteboard goes away. And then the kids are completely working on their own. So the lessons, when they're very short. They're sometimes as short as 5 minutes. Because if the teacher wants to talk to the group, she can do it without having to grab them and take them somewhere else. And you can see there's another class going on back there. And at one point, they actually had 3 classes in this at the same time. And apparently, it worked very well. We had told them not to put more than 2, but they put 3 classes in there and said it still worked absolutely fine. Acoustics wasn't a problem. Noise wasn't a problem. Behavior wasn't a problem. Vandalism wasn't a problem. None of these things that people say are going to be problems never actually turn out. Our schools, you can go back to some of our schools with beautiful furniture that we purchased 6 and 7 years ago, and they look as new today as they did on the day the schools were originally. Because the idea is that if you respect kids, they respect you back. Plus, there's peer pressure. Because these spaces belong to somebody. So the kids are also, those who are prone to act out, are managed by their own peers. You don't have to have one adult try to manage 25 or 30 or 40 kids. So I just want to quickly run through some before and after pictures to show you again, to answer the question about what can and cannot happen. So if you look at these renovations, you'll see how small amounts of money can do wonders. So this is a library in a public school in Michigan, and that was after the small renovation that we did just over the summer. This is this whole building we did for like $250,000. And you can see this is just the hallway part of it. That's before, and that's that same hallway after. This is one of the classrooms, what it looked like. This is the after. This was what the outside of this building looked like. It was a small modular building that was small little windows kids couldn't look out of, metal doors. And we opened it up, and that's where the kids are now. They have lunch there, they do projects there. This is another building in that same campus. This was a little bit more ambitious fix. Jay was the architect for this, where we took a music room in the American School of Bombay that was originally designed as a hotel, right, Jay? As a hotel, and it's now functioning as a school. And that's what they ended up getting, a beautiful black box theater, where we had to actually raise the roof. And this whole thing was done in under...
It was done from, the construction started in the middle of May, and they were in there in September.
May to September, the whole thing was done. Your design started sometime in March of that year, so we're not going to put you on such a tight time frame, but anything is doable if you have unlimited amount of money. The whole school was done right in literally 3 or 4 months. Now this was a more modest budget. This was done for $1.5 million. This was an old gymnasium that was being repurposed at Scotch Ogburn College in Tasmania. That's the before picture, and that's that same space. It was converted to a student center for high school kids because they got a brand new gym, so they wanted to do something with this building. So again, you can see the before and the after. So if you can use your imagination and know what kids need and what teachers need, then all kinds of miraculous things can happen, even within buildings that look like yours. So, and oh, by the way, here's another picture from the American School of Bombay that looks like before and after that same space. You notice how we closed off that hallway that was there before, and then we have that space usable. And this is what one of the classrooms there look like. By the way, this is supposed to be the #1 school in all of India. That's what their classrooms look like. And now the two teachers work as a team collaboratively. This is good for you because this is what might tell you. This is a cafeteria in a school in Ohio. And this is what it looked like before. Now that wall back there actually was blocking a nice set of windows. And we wondered why. There was a hallway on the other side. So we said, let's knock that wall out. And that's that same space. So this is the kind of transformation we are hoping to see at your school. And these are not big budget projects. I mean, and these are all within the US, most of these projects that I showed you, and they can be done. So what I'm saying is 20 million might not sound like a lot of money, but used well, we can get nice bang for the buck for it. So this is the assessment we did of your school. And as I said, we have this instrument that we look at, and this instrument has actually been developed over 15 years based upon research about the aspects of a school design that truly impact the bottom line, which is teaching and learning, right? So we looked at a variety of criteria, and this is actually in our latest book as well. So you can do this yourselves. You can go take the book and evaluate it, and you can get a maximum of 2 or a minimum of 0. You can see a majority of the criteria you got 0. And so if you look at the scores, you can get 22 to 28 would be excellent, 14 to 21 would be adequate, and 0 to 13 would be inadequate. And your school building scored a 4. So it's miraculous that you guys are doing as well as you're doing with this kind of, with such a huge burden of the facility. So I really applaud the efforts Rhonda and her team are doing on this. That's a good question. It's pretty okay. Then the last thing. Okay, we still have time. The last thing is what we saw when we toured your school, and this is where I'm going to show you some opportunities. We're not calling this design, okay, because these are opportunities. The design will only happen after we actually talk to you. So in terms of the opportunities, here are just some pictures. One of the key things on this site is that there's no sense of arrival from the street. I mean, the place where you have the school sign is right above where the dumpsters are. And there's this wall, Jay has given a call it the Berlin Wall that sort of literally blocks off that whole section. And what we're saying is that we want the school to have a great curb appeal as people are driving down that main road. And then as you drive in, there should be some signature element that pops and makes this people feel, okay, we are arriving at something special, right? So we don't have any of that happening. And this, of course, the entrance is very nondescript. It's good to see there was a marching band practicing there. This morning we had the color guard there. So I'm glad to see people are actually using it, but it's not anything special. It's just there. So anyway, so the building is divided into these two sections, and I'll tell you all the problems that are there, which of course many of you probably know. This half is the academic half of the building, and in this half you'll see the entrance is pretty bad because you just walk into a just little, kind of a hole in the wall kind of an entrance, which is really not, it doesn't say anything about, the greatness of the school. So we need to do something about that. And fortunately, there's actually money in the budget specifically set aside for that. Then we have, that's some images. And as you walk around the corner, this is what you see. You see long hallways. Then, of course, you have this room, which is an opportunity, and we'll tell you why when we show you the suggestions. And then the next problem we have is that big, unfortunate space in the middle, which is which has no access to the outside, no daylight whatsoever. And we were there this afternoon, and students didn't even want to be there. I mean, they take their lunch and they get away as quickly as they can. So that's not a good space. And then, of course, the one opportunity to bring some light there is blocked off with that kitchen and the other space, which of course overlooks the dumpster. So that's not, so another opportunity lost to bring daylight into that space or connect to nature. And this is what the room looks like. And also the problem is that this is a big room, but it's even worse because it's surrounded by a pretty big hallway, which is also taking up a lot of space and doesn't contribute anything to the bottom line, which is teaching and learning. So, and the kitchen, for what it is it doesn't have very good serving system right now. It's too complicated to describe here, but it just doesn't work. Let's put it that way. And then, of course, the shining element of your school is the engineering program, which is actually fairly well designed. Even on the inside, they've managed to break down some walls, and they've created a sense of community there. And it's actually pretty well done, believe it or not. But the problem there is they're much too small for the size of the program that you have, for the number of kids who want to participate. And they have very little or no connection to the outdoors, which they really should have. And in that key location where they are, nobody knows it's there. As people drive by, nobody even knows there's an engineering program there. So we think that that's an opportunity. So that's what the inside looks like. They're pretty good equipment there as well. And then the worst part of this whole school are these interior classrooms. I mean, you have 30-some kids trapped in these interior spaces, which are just horrible. I mean, for hours and hours of the day. And daylight is absolutely critical for health, good health, and for teachers and for students. So this is really very bad. And actually, even a turn-of-the-century school in New York City, for example, wouldn't do this. Every classroom has beautiful windows and access to the outside. Kids can sit and look at the sky, and they can look outside. You don't have that opportunity here. And in Colorado, of all places, that shouldn't happen. And that's what those classrooms look like. We were told that that's the mummified version of the architect who designed the space. So anyway, so this is some of the, as I said, I don't want to call it design. Here are some ideas. And interestingly enough, what we found is that the thing that we can do with this building to make it more functional is also the cheapest thing you can do construction-wise, which is demolition. Just go in and start demolishing as much of the interior as you can. And the more you demolish, the better it becomes. And actually, as a line item, the demolition is the cheapest thing that you can buy on construction. There's very few things that are cheaper than demolition. So really, you can almost make a great school just by taking out a lot of walls. And that's exactly what we've done here. And if you notice here, the entry as you walk in can be a beautiful heart of the school, where there's this big electronic display of all the stuff that's currently happening. So it's constantly changing. It's not like a static thing. that is constantly updated about the latest happenings in the school. So anybody walking in knows what's happening. Then there's a nice sort of almost a hotel lobby kind of feel right there. And then there is probably a little cafe which can connect to this outside here. And you can literally go in and out from here, and there could potentially be an amphitheater out here. So this whole area is going to can be completely open and daylit and green, and the whole sense of arrival will be amazing. And it's a teaching and learning space, because kids are going to be here all the time, because you can remember the 4 modes of learning, all of that can happen here. Then, of course, the engineering space can be made bigger, and it can be an iconic architectural element. As people drive by, they see that. And then you notice that the cafe in the middle, so the central area, which is the cafe, actually there's a dotted line, which is what we are saying, you bring daylight in make it a double height space and bring daylight in from the ceiling, which then also helps the library upstairs, which has no daylight. And then remove the kitchen that's there, open it up and make it a green space, an outdoor eating space, and then daylight floods in from that side as well. And then as you walk in toward the cafe, you can see like maybe a hearth, a fireplace, something like that, making it feel like a beautiful lodge kind of thing. So it feels more like a cafe, and not like this huge institutional cafeterias. A place that you want to be all day, and teachers and students are going to be there using it for all kinds of teaching and learning activities. And it's substantially bigger than it's now, because you now captured, you notice we got rid of the hallways. So we got all of that space. So it's about 30% bigger than the existing space. So it's going to feel very generous, that space. And then the other things what we've done is, because of the budget problems, we haven't got rid of all the interior rooms. But what we've done is say that those rooms are going to have glass walls. And so if you are in one of those rooms, you're actually going to be seeing daylight, even though you're not at the window. So that way we can save money without it feeling like you're trapped in this box. And you notice those yellow spaces right outside those classroom areas? Those are learning commons. So that's where you can have the soft seating, you can have the technologies areas, you can have the research happening there, you can have what do you call satellite cafes, teacher work areas, all kinds of stuff animating that common spaces. So this is obviously something that will make this whole side of the building feel truly like a 21st century building. And yet, from a construction standpoint, we've done very, very little. So we think that this could fly. Now, of course, we've done this at a very high level. It's not detailed, because how this actually comes out is based on discussions we have with each of your departments, what they want and how it's actually going to look every space. I think most of these kinds of ideas that we're talking about are not ones that are going to bust the budget. And potentially the district will be able to dig deep in its pocket and find some money to do all these kinds of things, which are not in the plan right now, to be honest with you. But as I said, we wouldn't be here if the district didn't feel that there was, and they wouldn't be calling it an exemplar if all we were doing is deferred maintenance items. So clearly, your superintendency has said we are going to take this challenge on and do something about it.